habit, and we broke that into 2 chunks. So if you missed last week, we covered the internal forces that raise necessity last week, and those were personal standards of excellence and obsession with a topic. So today we are covering external forces, and that section starts on page 144. So external forces to raise necessity, any outside factor that drives you to perform well. So this can also be referred to as pressure, but it's not unwanted pressure. So I'll give an example from my personal life, because I tend to do that all the time. One of my goals, as I have gotten further along in Plexus, was to go Emerald, so that, not that I could quit my job, but so that my husband could quit being gone so much, evenings, weekends, holidays, those sorts of things. Like, we got him home from the oil rigs, but now he's working a labor job, and the hours of that are not always ideal. And recently he had a schedule change, and so he is now working Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all of the holidays this year. And so that's putting pressure on me to adjust my timeline for Emerald and go Emerald faster, so that by, this fall, we can start to think about him coming home, finding a different job where he's not going to have to work Christmas, that kind of thing. So that's pressure, right? But it's not unwanted pressure, because when you're a high performer, when you're falling into the categories that Brendan's talking about, you actually want that pressure because it's pushing you to be your very best. High performers don't feel pushed, they feel pulled, he says. So page 144, he says, I used to get this wrong. In one of our pilot studies for the high performance indicator, we asked people to score whether they agreed strongly with this statement. I feel an external demand from my peers, family, boss, mentor, or culture to succeed at high levels. To his initial surprise, he says the statement did not correlate with high performance. In asking high performers about that result, he learned that the reason is because the demands that they sense to succeed do not come from other people. If they do feel pressure from others in a way that makes them perform better, it likely just reinforces choices or behaviors they may have already committed to. So it's like that extra motivation, right? Another way of saying this is that high performers don't necessarily view external forces as negative things or as casual reasons for their performance. High performers don't feel threatened. They don't feel negative motivation. Instead, they feel that these things are positive external forces. They want to do well to serve a purpose. So there's 2 primary external forces. So it's split up into 2 things. The first is social duty or obligation, and the second is purpose. So social duty and obligation talks about often we will do more for others than we will for ourselves. He uses the example of, if you are a parent and your kiddo is crying in the night, you're going to get up and you're going to go to that kiddo, even though you know you need sleep. They need you more, and you feel that duty and that obligation to help them because you are their parent. And so that's kind of an example of that social duty obligation. And it's more necessary for them to have you there than for you to get sleep. So who needs me more right now is one of the things that he asks himself as far as gauging social duty and obligation. I'm on page 146, and I'm going to touch on some things. A tremendous amount of research shows that people tend to maintain motivation, give more effort, and higher performance when they're held accountable for their outcomes, are evaluated more often, and have the opportunity to demonstrate their expertise or gain respect from those they serve. In other words, if you owe it to someone to do well and you feel that doing well will exhibit your expertise, then you'll feel greater necessity to perform at higher levels. He says, often a sense of duty to others can feel like a negative thing in the short term. But over the long term, adherence to the meeting that positive obligation helps make them feel good. So like getting up in the night with your kiddo makes you feel like a good parent. Like you would feel like a bad you laid there awake listening to your kids scream. So it's the same way. Like even though the situation itself might feel like something you don't want to do, doing that thing makes you feel good in the long term. Helping an elderly parent is another example of that. Like if they need you to help shovel their walks, you might not want to go over there after you've already shoveled your walks and do it. But when you do it, you're going to feel good about yourself because you have that sense of duty and obligation and you're living up to that standard and fulfilling it. And then in contrast, he compares that to underperformers. He says that underperformers like see these obligations as a negative thing and they complain more about them and they don't look at the positive outcome as a result of doing those things. They complain more. They have a hard time seeing that those things really aren't a negative thing over the long haul. Meeting our obligations correlates with positive well-being. So we feel good about ourselves when we do that. At work, a sense of doing the right thing actually drives positive performance. He says, when you feel the drive to serve others, you sustain solid performance longer. This is one reason, for example, why members of the military are often so extraordinary. They have a sense of duty to something beyond themselves, which is their country and to their fellow comrades in arms. It's also why most high performers mention purpose as motivating their best performance. Their sense of duty or obligation, higher vision, mission, or calling propels them through the hardships of achievements. So yeah, those external forces are going to be like feeling that connectivity, that purpose, and really allowing those things to propel you forward. Another thing that he talks about here is real deadlines. And I love what he has to say about real deadlines. So that's what I was talking about with my husband, right? Like before it was just like this thing, we want him to come home. We don't want him to be gone as much. But now that I got his work schedule and I saw what he's working this year and I don't like it, like that set a real deadline in my mind. I'm like, you know what? He's never missed a Christmas. We're not going to start this year. Like somehow I have to go Emerald in enough time that we can pay off, XYZ debt so that he can put his 2 weeks in and not work Christmas this year. That's a real deadline. And it's nice to have goals, but the real deadline is like when something has to happen or something negative results from it not happening. He talks about a false deadline. He says that's somebody's preference of when something would maybe happen. And I'm going to read this chunk. It's an email that he sent. He says, whenever someone emails him a request without a due date, with or without a due date, he replies in this way. He says, thank you for your request. Can you give me the real deadline date for this? That means the date when the world will explode, your career will be destroyed, or a domino effect leading to both your and my ultimate demise will truly begin. Any date before that is your preference, and with respect, by the time you sent me this request, I have 100 preference requests in front of you. So to serve you best, I have to put you in ranking order with the real deadlines. Can you please let me know that drop dead date and why specifically it occurs then? From there, I'll decide the priority and coordinate appropriately with you, and as always, serve with excellence. Thanks, Brendan. I think that is so super cool because how often do we have that like, oh yeah, I would like to be, gold by convention. But what's going to happen if you're not gold by convention? Well, maybe nothing. So you start out motivated, do your IPA for 2 or 3 weeks, and then decide like, well, I'm actually okay if I'm not gold till August. And then you sit back and kick your feet up, right? Because there was no real deadline to that. But what's going to happen, let's say that you were gold at last convention and you're trying to grow a team and you're going to convention again this year. And your goal was to be senior gold by this convention. And what's going to happen if you're not senior gold? Well, you're going back to convention gold again. And if you're trying to grow a team, that doesn't show growth and that doesn't show the things that you want to show through leadership and those sorts of things either. So find that necessity is what I'm saying for you. It's going to be different from person to person. And he talks about, the world exploding. Obviously, he's joking and stuff there. But I think the whole idea in raising necessity is finding that discomfort. Like what is happening in your daily life that you're not comfortable with? Wesley's been very public about posting, missing school trips with her kiddos and how that's not okay for her. And everybody's got something like that. So you just have to find that and you have to connect with it. How are you not living your best life? Is it time freedom? You're missing out on time freedom with your kids or with your spouse, or you're home with your kids, but you're missing your spouse during the time freedom because they're not having it. Is it finances? Are you living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 kids and you need more space? I mean, there's always some area of our life that we are settling, that it's uncomfortable. We've settled into being uncomfortable for so long that it becomes like our new comfort zone. And so when we're raising necessity, we have to look at what is necessary that we've also maybe forgotten about, I think, because sometimes that tends to happen. Deadlines help us focus on what needs to happen now. They help you prioritize. Keeping the fire, he says, is when external and internal demands mix. So on page 2, he says, the bottom line is we change and improve over time only when we must. When the internal and external forces on us are strong, we climb, and when it gets most difficult, we remember our cause. When we're afraid and battling hardship and darkness, we remember we came in the cause of light, and we sustain positive performance over the long term. And then he launches into 3 practices that can fire up a greater sense of necessity. So practice number 1, know who needs your A game. I love this section because that was something, like he says, when he sits in his office chair, that's when he asks himself, it's something he does every day. Like he sits in his office chair and he's like, okay, who needs my A game? I think this is really applicable to network marketing and when you're trying to grow a team. Even if you're early on in your business and you don't have a ton of business builders, when you sit down to work your business for that day, who needs my A game? Sometimes it's going to be those customers or brand new ambassadors that signed up for wholesale that need you to walk them through how to take the products and detox and get them more information and those things. Sometimes when you're looking at who needs your A game, it's going to be you. It's going to be your personal IPA. Oh my gosh, I haven't sponsored anybody in a month. Who needs my A game? Me. I need myself to show up for work. But I love asking that question, especially as you get a growing team or you have someone that's expressed interest to you in the business, but they're just totally lost with where to start. I think one of the hard things is a lot of go-getters, when they start this business, just dive all in and they find what they need to do to succeed. But I would say that a lot of people are not that way. They don't know what they need to do to succeed, and it's not the business, and it's not that they're not willing to do the work. They don't know what the work is. They're not sure. And so when you sit down in that office chair, who needs your A game? The person who said they were maybe interested in getting their products paid for, but hasn't made a Facebook post or hasn't reached out to anybody or scheduled a launch party or done anything, to work towards that goal. Especially right now with what they announced at Super Saturday yesterday, right? Like the Me+3 incentive. Anybody who've signed up in the last couple months, that's who needs your A game. They need you to about what's going on with this incentive. Don't expect them to have watched 3 hours of Super Saturday to figure out what's going on if they're brand new. Even expect them to open their email, because they might not. Reach out to them, tell them what's going on. We're going to get a group of people running with that. And the idea there is to hold their hand for long enough to show them what they need to do to be successful. Whether or not they are successful ultimately falls back on them. Utility for anybody's success but your own. But you can give them the tools that they need to succeed. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to touch on what's going on right now. So yeah, who needs your A game? Asking yourself that every single day. Do a gut check. Have you been bringing your A game to your own business? But it also forces you to think of someone else and maybe put someone else before yourself. I think a lot of personality types tend to do that anyways. I am more putting myself first. So I like that, like, waking up and going, okay, who needs me today? Who's up? And sometimes it's not even people in your business. Sometimes it's somebody who has posted that they're struggling, or it's a personal friend who, is having a health crisis. Like, that person might need you just to be there for them. And it might have nothing to do with network marketing, right? You just need to be a good friend. And who needs me? He talks about forcing you to think of someone else, but then he says, what you need the most, because that's focusing on your real deadlines, right? Like, there's any number of things vying for my attention in any given week. And so, for example, getting the rest of the way prepped for book study today, like that was something that was on my list for Wednesday. It was on my list for Friday, because those are my days when I'm down to one kiddo from three. But it didn't get done either of those 2 days. But today it was on my list, and guess what had to happen today? That so it's finding the real deadline, right? It would have been nice to have it done Wednesday or Friday, but today was the real deadline. It had to happen today. There was no putting it off after that. And so I think there's a lot of things like that. So we'll put like those things on my to-do list, and then they're at the bottom of the list. And if I make it to it, awesome. But if I don't, it can keep the next day without the world exploding, like he says. He talks about your identity in the game of life, page 154. And he has the difference between these different identities. I thought this was kind of cool. And I like that you can kind of assign these identities to people, but I'm going to touch on them briefly. So dabblers have a passing interest in the game of life. They look at many things and try many things, but they never really jump into anything with full engagement or commitment. This is the person that makes one Facebook post and then quits because they didn't have a successful network marketing business, right? Like they dabbled in the idea of having a network marketing business and they didn't get 15 customers off of one post, and so they quit. Novices have interest too, but they're intent on developing some expertise. So they jump in deeper than dabblers, but they don't deal well with the discouragement. So this is the person that made the Facebook post, started reading about the product, started watching videos on YouTube, had their sister-in-law come in and say that they were never going to make it with Plexus, and then they quit. Somebody who doesn't deal well with discouragement. Amateurs have more than interest. They have passion. They've jumped in deep. They truly engage in a subject. They want to get better. They get through more obstacles than novices do, but they tend to remain at an unskilled level unless they get fast and positive feedback or recognition. So this is the person that's like all in for 2 months and then disappears for forever. And they might sign up, 5, 6 people in that 2 months, but hey, they didn't go gold, so they're done. That's going to be your amateur. Players have passion, but also greater commitment and skill. With great focus, they teach themselves to master one area of the game. They excel in themselves happy as long as they get their turn and get compensation. If the game changes or the rules change, though, they're quickly embittered. Players desperately need the rules and routines. They don't like disruption or negative feedback. They need a high degree of fairness if they're going to participate. And if someone on the team gets paid more than they do, they freak out and they quit. They're committed to becoming a success in their position, but rarely achieve a holistic level of success. So this is your person that maybe did really great with their personal sponsor, but never stepped into a leadership role. So business got stuck, or they fizzled out because they didn't do enough personal development, or they got some negative feedback, or somebody joined the company after they did and saw success faster than them. They decided that they weren't having fun anymore, so they quit. And then there are high performers. Yay, we all want to be high performers. High performers are like players. They have greater all-around necessity, skill, and team spirit. They're all in on the game. They play at a high level no matter what the recognition or awards, because the game is intrinsically rewarding, also part of how they view their service to the world. Their identity is tied to the game, but also to the team and those who they serve. They don't want to master a game, they want to be known for the game itself. And such a high degree of personal excellence and duties to the team, they really become the go-to person in every game. They stand out because they not only deliver exceptional individual performance, but they also make every person better through their influence. My really big example of high performers would be the people that are succeeding in this business, that are cheering others in this business on. Right? Like, it doesn't matter who reaches out to you with a question or, who you're talking to, like, you want everybody to succeed like you've succeeded. So you're willing to kind of mentor others, even if it doesn't directly benefit you. That was kind of what I thought of when I thought of high performers. So those are just some descriptions that he's made. I just kind of had fun identifying with those. And it was funny because for each one that I read, different names came to mind on my team, and I'm like, oh, that's where we were. And then kind of stop and ask myself, like, could I have done something to get them to the next level? And sometimes there's a question about that, but a lot of times it really is just those internal and external motivators, and we can't sort that out for people. The best thing we can do when people get stuck is suggest personal development to them, see what they're struggling with. Is it their belief? Is it their confidence? Is it motivation? Like, make those suggestions, don't open the book and read it for themselves. That's not anything that you could have changed for them. Okay. So the next thing that he wants you to do, oh, wait, I'm missing a section, sorry. Flow, I wanted to touch on this. He talks about flow. He says when several elements are in play and you're choosing a high performance identity, you're going to immerse yourself fully in activities that force you to stretch. So there's 10 quick things I wanted to buzz through that he talks about here before we move on to the second thing. The first is that you have goals that are clear and challenging yet attainable. Be realistic with your goals. We've all heard that person that's like, I'm silver and I'm going to be emerald in 3 months. And it's like, well, unless you know a lot of people who know a lot of people and you're going to work 50 hours a week, you're probably not going to have that happen. Attainable, realistic goal, but make it be a challenging goal. If you already have 15 people on your team, don't say that you're going gold by convention. All you got is 5 more people. So that's something that's going to stretch you. Strong concentration and focused attention are required. The thing that you're doing is intrinsically rewarding. You lose self-conscious a bit and feel serene. I really like that one, like that point where you know you're doing things, the thing you're supposed to be doing, that you're like making a post and not caring upon, or that you haven't showered in a week because it has nothing to do with the post at hand, right? Like, I think that's kind of cool. Time stops and you feel so focused on the present that you lose track of time. You get immediate feedback on your performance. There's a balance between your skill level and the challenge presented. You know that what you're doing is doable, even if it's difficult. You have a sense of personal control over the situation and the outcome. You stop thinking about your physical needs and you have the ability to focus completely on the activity at hand. So a lot of that has to do with just feeling pulled towards those goals that we set for ourselves. And I think, you know, you go through each of those at different periods of time. So the next thing, practice 2 for raising necessity, is affirm the why. Who revisited their "we're doing plexus" as we went into 2019? Because it really should have been every single person who did that. And if you haven't, I encourage you to take some time and do that. He says, affirm the why and don't keep it silent. Confidently affirm to others. So he says that he used to think that high performers were all extroverts because you hear them like talking to themselves and talking about their goals and how they're going to achieve their goals and all of that. But he says that personality, extrovert versus introvert, is not correlated to performance. It's just that people who are working towards their goals can confidently speak about them to others, whether or not they're introverted or extroverted, because it's all part of the process. What they're doing is affirming their why. Who in your network do you call when you make up your mind you're going to do something? Because I have about 5 different people. If I make up my mind I'm going to do something, poor Wesley gets like 4-minute long voice messages from me. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to talk to you about it for 5 minutes. And I do the same thing. You know, I call my mom and I tell her the same thing, and I tell my husband the same thing. And so that's my network. That's my support network. And what I'm doing when I have that is I'm affirming my why. And as I speak it to other people, I hear myself talking about it. It becomes real to me and it motivates me and propels me into action, but it also holds me accountable. He says your ego becomes tied in with that when you start to tell people what you're doing. I had a really bold moment, you know, a few days ago where I posted that I was going to go emerald this spring on my personal social media page. Well, cool, because that means like thousands of people can see that, right? So I guess I better do it because now my ego's tied into it. If I don't do it, I just made myself look like an idiot. So that's all part of affirming your why. And you can do it to your own comfort level, but if you're setting goals and you're not sharing them with anybody, you're not affirming your why. So not only revisiting your why and revisiting those goals, but sharing them with others to convince yourself you're going to do them, and to just commitment. It's affirmations, basically. He says high performers are confident in their purpose, but they do tend to question their approach, which is actually a good thing. Because if you're 100% confident in your approach at all times, I would argue that you're not being coachable. You want to be constantly reevaluating, like, this is the thing that I plan to do, or asking your sponsor, like, if you were going to do this, how would you approach it? Or when you were in the same spot I was in, what did you do to break through this barrier, or whatever? Like, that is like approaching that thing coachably, instead of just 100% confidence. You're 100% confident that you can achieve what it is you're trying to achieve. You just have to find the best approach to do it. So you're constantly asking yourself that question, evaluating, examining your processes, and making sure you're not missing anything. All high performers are always open to better processes. And then I talked about this, but declaring something to others involves your ego. Affirmations are super, super important. So he talks about affirmations in this. And then he talks just really briefly also about visualization, which we know is super huge. Like, Rachel Hollis has the last 90 days journal, where you're writing down your 5 and then you're writing down 10 things that you made happen as if they've already happened. That whole entire book and that whole entire process is cultivating gratitude, which is important, but it's also just affirming everything that you're going to bring into your life and make happen. And it's she starts out the book with visualization, and so you're spending time visualizing what your best life would be like if you made all 10 of those things happen. So don't discount the power of those things. I actually have so much fun doing those things sometimes that I have to bring myself back out of them because I get stuck there. I'm like, oh, and we're going to have this thing, we're going to do that thing, we're going to take this trip. And then I'm like, yeah, I just spent like hours visualizing. I probably should actually do, right? It's fun, but you can't get stuck. The third thing he talks about in terms of raising necessity is leveling up your squad. So what type of people are you spending time around? Are they positive people? Are they negative people? And what I really liked about his approach to this is all of the other books that I have read, Who You Surround Yourself With Defines Who You Are, talks about if people are negative or if they are not a positive force in your life, that you should just eliminate them from your life. And I don't disagree. I mean, sometimes there's a relationship that's doing you more harm than good. As a personal example, a girl that I was really good friends with, we were friends on social media, and when I started sharing about Plexus, I started to get really yucky feelings from her. She had a network marketing business from another company, and all of a sudden I felt very, she wasn't doing anything really, but I just felt like passive aggressively things were not going well. And I told myself for a year and a half, like, that I was projecting that onto myself, and that she didn't think that, and that I was crazy. And then this major incident happened where she put a live video out there, how wrong I was and how my advice made her very sick, tore me completely down. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, so I wasn't imagining this all along. And that way from it, I not only unfriended her, but I blocked her because I didn't want to see anything else she had to say, whether it was about me or anything else. And I didn't see anything I had to say to use that fuel for her fire against me. And I cannot believe the amount of relief I felt at blocking her. And I thought to myself, I should have done that a year ago because I knew it wasn't right. I felt in my gut that our relationship was not in a good place and she wasn't wanting good things for me. And it made me sad. So I tried to hang on to it. But so you can cut people out of your life if they truly are being negative. But sometimes we have, the father-in-law, or sometimes it's in our own family, or the cousin or the sister-in-law. You can't always just disown family, right? Like, you can distance yourself a little bit, but they're still family. So what he talks about in this book, the approach to take to leveling up your squad, is to spend more time and not focus on the people that are maybe negative that you were spending a lot of time with. It's almost a natural transition. So it's like, instead of grabbing coffee with the coworker that you guys always sit there and, bitch about what everybody has done that week wrong, who could you grab coffee with? Grab coffee with someone who's successful, succeeding, positive, Like, hey, do you want to go grab coffee today? I would love to get to know you better. Let's chat. Talk with that person, and naturally you're going to be spending less time with the negative person. And so I think that is just a super cool approach to that, because you don't have to feel like you're cutting people out of your life for forever, unless they're really being mean to you, and then it's okay. It's okay to cut those people out if they are bringing you down. So that was really all I had for you today. Those were those 3 action items to raise necessity with the external forces. You can kind of see why we split this up into a couple chunks, because it was just so much to cover. To be honest with you, I'm going to go back and reread it because I probably missed stuff. Kim says boundaries are good. I totally agree. What does anybody else have to say? Did you learn anything about yourself or your practices? Like, I don't know if you guys took that high performance indicator quiz or not. Score on the necessity section if you did. Does anybody want to share? For mine, my score on that section was a 4.33 out of 5. So I was paying attention to that section.
What was that email called? Do you remember?
I think it was like the 6 habits.
Was it like an HPI or something?
Yeah, it's coming from High Performance Indicator, and then they just come from Brendon Burchard. I don't know. I went through the book and I wrote my score at the top of each section.
Mine was a 4.
I think he says anything, 4 or above is really good.
Okay, mine was a 3.28 out of 5.
Yeah, and I liked having that going into each section of the book, because the ones that I like have a 4.8 or a 5 on, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to read this, but I don't need to pay as much attention to this, because it's just such an overwhelming amount of information in this book that it gave me that focus, like, oh, here's the 2 categories I'm low in. I'm really going to pay attention here. So it was kind of cool.
Mine was a 3, so I definitely need to raise my necessity.
I think my biggest takeaway from this chapter was the, negativity thing. Trying to spend more time with the positive and limit the time with the negative people. I've gotten better at that, but since I've been with Plexus, and probably over the last year, I've noticed that a lot of the people I was spending my time with before Plexus were very negative people. So it's been quite the transition, but it helps that all of you lovely people are positive. So at least I've got more positive influence in my life now.
That's where I'm at. Most of my social interaction is actually with you guys. So that's a good thing, but maybe a little bit sad, because I have no life outside of like my house and you guys. But I do have some friends that have been friends, for forever, and they're not negative people. It's not like it furthers my business, but personal relationships are awesome, whether or not they relate back to Plexus or not. But yeah, I've definitely found those people. And it's kind of funny, like once you sort out what's going on with that and you identify that person, sometimes they kind of excuse themselves out of your life. I've noticed that with a couple different people. It's not like I stopped contacting them. They just kind of fell off, and we never stayed in touch after that, and that's okay too.
What I found is that I value myself more now, and I can tell that I didn't before, because the way that some of my friends treated me was not okay with it then, and I'm not now. So
that's a good point. I think yellows have more of a problem with that than reds. Jillian's shaking her head yes. I'm looking at you. Anybody else have any big takeaways from habit 3? What's coming next? Oh, we're switching section 2 to social habits. Uh-oh, increase productivity. That's what's coming down the line, guys. All right, well, we will see you next Sunday, same time, same place. Have a lovely week.